as the world marks the International Day to End Impunity Against Journalists. This, in my view, is a very important day in celebration of freedom and reminding ourselves of the sanctity of life and human rights across the global community. It has been 10 years since the adoption of the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists and the corresponding issue of impunity. We in Kenya, as you know, are signatories to that plan of action, and as government, we hold dear the safety and life of every journalist, as we do for each and every Kenyan. We are saddened each time a journalist is endangered, harmed, or loses life in the course of duty. We remain concerned that all over the world, physical abuse and even termination of life for journalists in the line of duty still persists 10 years after the adoption of the UN Plan of Action. This is to be condemned in the strongest terms possible by civilized society everywhere in the world. It is particularly tragic that in some of the recent instances across the global community, crimes against journalists have been perpetrated by those who should be the duty bearers in the protection of freedom of the media and, significantly, the right to life for everyone. These are critical intersections. There are critical intersections between the objectives of journalism and those of government. Both are interested in the welfare of the people. The only divergence is that we are pursuing this objective from two different dimensions, but the overall objective remains the welfare of the Kenyan people. Accordingly, the two, in my view, ought to work together rather than appear to be hostile and adversarial against each other. They ought to work in complementarity of purpose rather than in imaginary and often hostile competition. Both should be keen on achieving a democratic, free and fair society governed by the rule of law and, of course, in line with our 2010 constitutional dispensation. Granted, ladies and gentlemen, that depending on unfolding events from time to time, we expect that the media, and on one hand, and the government on the other, may hold divergent views. But we should not see that as a source of negative conflict, but in my view, it should be seen as an opportunity to enable the two stakeholder segments engage in constructive dialogue so that we develop a common denominator on how we should respond to the strategic issues emanating from their form and craft a logical and feasible way moving forward. Editors are important custodians of information, and as gatekeepers in the public information and communication space, editors decide which information will reach the public and that which will not. They even decide what angle or slant information takes, and sometimes very forcefully so, and even deliberately. Apart from information, editors also set agenda for the society. They decide which issues will be the greatest questions of the day for public discourse and which ones should be ignored. So what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that you play an integral role in shaping public opinion depending on unfolding events from time to time. And in that vein, in my view, we should work in partnership because we are all out to serve the well-being of the Kenyan people. Editors also shape opinion on important public issues. Indeed, you have the capacity to make the big issue small, and in the converse, also make the small issue big. Crimes against journalists come in different guises and, of course, perpetrated by different players. The assumption, based on historical experience, tends to be that government is the perpetrator. But this may not necessarily be the case. Indeed, most of the time, rogue elements within government have given entire departments, such as law enforcement agents, a bad name while acting in their individual capacities. The government, in my view, must remain vigilant at all times and will indeed do so to protect journalists and citizens against rogue elements within our midst. Within the context of self-regulation, ladies and gentlemen, the media must also, in equal measure, guard against internal rogue elements whose acts in their individual capacities may tarnish the hard-earned image and reputation of the fourth estate. This may be media owners, journalists at the top echelons who oppress their juniors, or those who engage in gender-based defiant behavior against their colleagues. Commercial interests, too, come into play to facilitate oppression of journalists and to muzzle free expression. These two must constitute part of what journalists protest every second day of November. Let us also recognize that freedom comes with responsibility. Editors have got the duty to protect other citizens against abuse through sensational, prurient, and salacious falsehoods and other unethical coverage that victimizes and violates them. We as a country respect media freedom. We hold media freedom dear to our hearts, and we will do everything possible as government to ensure that media freedom is upheld in conformity to the relevant articles of the Constitution and in other pieces of law, if not subsequent legislations. We do not believe in media censorship or gagging of the media. If the media is responsible, then the media should be able to regulate itself in line with the laws of the land and ethical dictates of your very profession.